The functions of the circulatory system can be categorized into three major areas: transportation, regulation, and protection. The transportation function of the blood involves the movement of all substances necessary for cellular metabolism throughout the circulatory system. The movement of the respiratory gases oxygen and carbon dioxide is accomplished by the red blood cells, or erythrocytes. In the lungs, oxygen from inspired air attaches to the hemoglobin in the red blood cells, to then be carried to the cells throughout the body. At the same time, the waste product of cellular metabolism, carbon dioxide, is released by the erythrocytes and carried from the lungs in expired air. The movement of nutritive substances throughout the body by the circulatory system is a vital part of this transportation function. With the plasma of the blood, many of the digestive nutrients taken into our body are dissolved and carried to the cells throughout the body. Such things as carbohydrates and sugars, fats, proteins, vitamins, and minerals are all carried by the circulatory system. The movement of waste products is equally important to the body's well-being. The breakdown of proteins through metabolisms produces nitrogen-containing compounds that must be eliminated from the body. These are carried from their source of production in the cells to the kidneys, where they are filtered out of the blood. Excessive water and certain salts are also carried to the skin for their eventual elimination. The regulation function of the blood involves the maintaining of the pH of the body through buffers dissolved in the blood and amino acids of proteins. The circulatory system, in conjunction with the urinary system, regulates the amount of water and salts in the blood. The integumentary system and the circulatory system also help to maintain the body's temperature by the dispersion of heat from the muscles of the body. Some of this heat maintains normal body temperature, while excess heat is dissipated through the skin into the atmosphere. The protective function of the blood involves the circulatory's ability to respond to injury as well as ability to defend against foreign substances in the body. The clotting mechanism protects against the loss of blood, while leukocytes, or white blood cells, are specialized to fight off infections. Blood is made up of two basic components: a clear straw-colored liquid called plasma, and a collection of minute solid particles that are referred to collectively as formed elements, blood cells, or corpuscles. These formed elements include of three kinds of blood cells: erythrocytes, or red blood cells, leukocytes, or white blood cells, thrombocytes, or platelets. About 45% of the volume of blood in the body is made up of blood cells. The remaining 55% is liquid plasma, containing important blood proteins such as serum, albumin, serum, globulin, fibrinogen, and other dissolved substances. Red blood cells, or RBC, or erythrocytes, are tiny biconcave discs that lose their nuclei before entering the bloodstream. Their primary function is the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. They pick up oxygens from the lungs, which is carried by the hemoglobin found in the red blood cells. The presence of iron in the hemoglobin is what gives erythrocytes their characteristic red color. They are only about 7.7 microns in diameter and are the most numerous of the blood cells, numbering about 4.2 million to 5.9 million per millimeter's third power of blood. Red blood cells are produced in the red marrow of bones. Red blood cells have a life expectancies ranging up to about 120 days. When blood breaks down, the hemoglobin they contain is converted to the other substances by the body. Hemoglobin consists of heme, a pigment containing iron, and a protein called globin, a reddish-brown pigmented substances called bilirubin. Result from this hemoglobin breakdown. Some of the bilirubin may undergo further chemical changes and can be converted into a greenish pigmented substance called bilirubin, and biliverdin are pigments which are then eliminated by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and secreted into small intestines as needed to aid in the digestive process. When the liver or its ducts become diseased or fail to operate properly, excess quantities of these pigments may build up in the bloodstream, causing the condition known as jaundice. White blood cells, WBC, or leukocytes, are spherical cells that contain nuclei of varying shapes and sizes. Their primary function is defense against infection in the body. They may even leave the blood vascular systems to fight infections in the tissues of the body. They may pass through walls of capillaries through a process called diapedesis. They vary in size, but are larger than red blood cells, averaging about 10 microns in diameter. Their number range from 4,300 to 10,800 per millimeter power 3 of blood. Most leukocytes are produced by the red marrow of bones, while the lymphocytes are produced by the lymphatic system. Leukocytes are subdivided into 5 different kinds of blood cells, usually grouped in 2 categories by the characteristics of their cytoplasm, that's inside the cell. Some contain small granules within their cells and are called granulocytes, while the ones that do not contain granules are called agranulocytes. The granulocytes include neutrophils and eosinophils and basophils. Agranulocytes, including lymphocytes and monocytes. Some of the leukocytes have the ability to see out foreign substances in the blood or in the tissue spaces, engulf the foreign substance through a process called phagocytosis. These are called phagocytes. The white blood cells that are phagocytes are the neutrophils and the monocytes, and the eosinophils. The lymphocytes are important in the body's immunity, including the production of antibodies, while the basophils are believed to be prevented from the intravascular blood from clotting by producing heparin. Plasma is the liquid part of the blood. It is the material in which we find formed elements suspended. It also has many other substances dissolved in it. Plasma contains water, about 92 to 95%, and dissolved components, about 5 to 8%. These dissolved components including blood proteins like serum, albumin, serum hemoglobin, and fibrinogen, inorganic salts like chlorides, bicarbonates, phosphates, and sulfates of sodium, potassium, calcium, and magnesium. Nutrients like carbohydrates such as glucose, fats, proteins, minerals, and vitamins. Wastes like respiratory gases of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. Enzymes, hormones, antibodies, and other ingested substances such as alcohol, drugs. Plasma has all the clotting factors removed, called serum. It resembles plasma in that it has a clear amber appearance. Thrombocytes, or platelets, are the smallest of the blood cells, varying in size, but averaging about 3 microns in diameter. They're irregular shaped discs, sometimes called cytoplasmic fragments, or megakaryocytes, from which they are formed. They are produced in red bone marrow. They are more numerous than the leukocytes, ranging from 150,000 to 350,000 per millimeter power 3 of blood. Their primary function is to help form clots in the walls of broken blood cells. Cardiology refers to the study of the heart. The heart is a muscular pump which serves to pump blood to all parts of the body. The heart is found in the region of the trunk of the body. Above the diaphragm is called the thoracic cavity. It is located in the inferior portion of the space between the 2 lungs called mediastinum. The heart is made up of 3 layers of tissue. The outermost layer of the heart is a serous membrane called epicardium, or visceral pericardium. The middle layer of the heart is the muscle layer and is called myocardium. The innermost layer, adjacent to the lumen of the heart, is an endothelial layer called endocardium. The heart is divided into 4 chambers. The heart and its chambers are always identified by their relative location in the body in the anatomical position. Remember that in the position right or left always refers to the body's right or left, not the observer's. The superior or upper chambers of the heart are always the receiving chambers for blood entering the heart and are called atria, or plural, or atrium singular. They are identified as the right atrium and the left atrium. The lower chambers of the heart always serve as the exit chambers for blood leaving the heart and are called ventricles. They are identified as the right ventricle and left ventricle. The dual pumping action of the heart produces 2 systems of circulation. One system is called pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation refers to the blood vascular system, which carries blood from the heart to the lung for oxygenation and back of the heart. Because of this, the right ventricle of the heart is said to be beginning of the pulmonary circulation, and the left atrium is the end of the pulmonary circulation. Systemic circulation is the part of the blood vascular system. It provides for blood circulation to all parts of the body, carrying nutrients, oxygenated blood, then returning back to the heart. It is the most extensive part of the blood circulation. Because of this, the left ventricle of the heart is said to be the beginning of the systemic circulation, and the right atrium is the end of the systemic circulation. Each chamber of the heart has 1 or more vessels located within it. Because the atria will serve as receiving chambers, the vessel will enter each atrium are always veins. Remember, a vein is a blood vessel which carries blood towards the heart. On the other hand, ventricles are the exit chambers of the heart, and as such, the vessel associated with each ventricle is called an artery. An artery is a blood vessel which will carry blood away from the heart. The right atrium of the heart has 3 vessels which will enter the chamber. The superior vena cava serves to drain the head, upper extremities, and parts of the chest. The inferior vena cava provides the blood drainage from the abdomen and the lower extremity. Third vessel entering the right atrium is the coronary sinus, which drains the heart muscle itself and is not debited since it enters from the backside. The right ventricle of the heart has only one large vessel which exits this chamber, called the pulmonary trunk, or the common pulmonary artery. It will carry the blood toward the lung for oxygenation. The left atrium of the heart has 4 vessels which will enter the chamber. These are the 4 pulmonary veins. There are 2 of these vessels coming from each lung. They serve to return blood from the lungs, which has delivered their oxygenation by the pulmonary arteries. The left ventricle of the heart has only one large vessel which exits the chamber. This vessel is called aorta, and more specifically the ascending aorta. It will carry the blood towards all of the parts of the body as parts of systemic circulation. The right and left atria are divided by a wall called the atrial septum, while the right and left ventricles are divided by a wall called the ventricle system. Right atrium is separated from right ventricle by a wall called the right atrioventricular septum, and the left atrium is separated from the left ventricle by the left atrioventricular septum. In the right atrioventricular septum of the heart is a valve called tricuspid, or the right atrioventricular valve. The name tricuspid describes the fact that this valve is divided into 3 sections called cusps. The valve is designed much like a series of 3 small parachutes. The dome of the parachute is the cusp. The cords connecting to the cusp are chordae tendineae. In the man at the button of the cords is the papillary muscle. When the heart contracts, the cusps will billow and close the opening. The chordae tendineae prevent the immersion of the cusps, and the papillary muscle are what hold the chordae tendineae in place. In the left atrioventricular septum of the heart is called the bispid mitral or left atrioventricular valve. This valve constructed slightly different from the tricuspid valve, but it works essentially in the same, and also has a chordae tendineae attaching it to the papillary muscles. There are also valves located at the opening of the vessels which exit the heart. The valve at the exit of the right ventricle in the mouth of the pulmonary trunk is called pulmonary semilunar valve. The valve is comprised of 3 cusps that are like pockets on a shirt. They will allow the blood to flow away from the heart, but they will billow and prevent the flow of the blood back to the heart. When filled with blood, each cusp resembles a half moon, consequently named semilunar. The valve at the exit of the left ventricle into the mouth of the ascending aorta is called the aortic semilunar valve. This valve construction and function are identical to what the pulmonary semilunar valve. As noted earlier, the heart is a muscle which pumps blood. It does so through a process called cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle involves 2 main stages referred to as systole and diastole. The contraction phase of the cardiac cycle is called systole. It begins with impulse to contact emitted by the sinoatrial node, sometimes called pacemaker. It is located in the back wall of the right atrium. The stimulus to contract then radiates through the heart valve in all directions. Because of this, the 2 atria are the first to contract. This contraction wave continues until it strikes another node called the atrioventricular node. It is located, as its name implies, in the wall between the right atrium and the right, adjacent to the openings of the tricuspid valve. The AV node is then responsible for picking up the signal to contract and sending impulse to contract down through the walls of the 2 ventricles, then contract after the atria have contracted. Following systole, or the contraction phase of the cardiac, heart begins to relax, causing the chambers to expand or dilate. This is called diastole, or the dilation phase of cardiac cycle. It proceeds in the same sequence as systole, beginning with the atria and followed by the ventricle. Some experts like to discuss a third aspect of this heart cycle and refer it to the period of arrest. However, it is not a totally separate period from systole and diastole, but merely this time frame during a cycle when both the atria and the ventricles are in diastole at the same time. Thus, this could be said that the period of rest overlaps atrial and ventricular diastole.